Micheál Martin is Ireland's Taoiseach or Prime Minister, and for 14 years he has led the Conservative Fianna Fail party. Just how has he managed to rebuild that party out of the ashes of a dire economic situation? And why is he in coalition with a party that has been their fierce political rivals for more than a century? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady and I'm here in Cork, which is Ireland's second city and home to its Taoiseach or Prime Minister Micheál Martin. His government is running a huge budget surplus, thanks largely to investment from tech and a big pharma industry. But there are problems here. There's a huge need for housing. Russia's war in Ukraine has brought 80,000 refugees here. And on top of all that, the threat of Trump's tariffs looms large.
Winning last year's election to become Ireland's Taoiseach for the second time, Micheál Martin set out his promise to the Irish people.
We're very clear about protecting the progress this country has made, but also developing new policies that meet the challenges of our time.
Fianna Fail's win came after a rocky time for the party, which up until 2011 had been the biggest party in Ireland's parliament, known as the Dáil, for 8 decades. A double blow from the 2008 financial crisis and Ireland's own housing bubble saw the country accept a bailout from the EU and IMF, with harsh conditions attached. For this, Fianna Fail were punished at the polls, falling to third place at the 2011 general election. Martin, who became leader that year, helped the party eventually enter government once again at the 2020 election, but this time as a coalition with traditional rivals Fine Gael. This was largely to keep Sinn Féin, the former political wing of the IRA, out of power. Micheál Martin is credited with bringing his party back to the front line of politics. But what do people here in his hometown of Cork make of the Taoiseach?
He's trying everything in his power and he can't do much more.
He keeps promising. So all these little promises, oh, this will happen, that will happen, and nothing happens. Nothing changes. Might change for them, but it won't change for us.
He's an absolute disgrace. He has never stood up for the Irish people. Irish people are homeless. The numbers are increasing every year upon year.
I actually was surprised at his choice of nominee for the presidency, but overall I think he's a very good politician and an excellent Taoiseach.
He now presides over a booming economy and doesn't have to call elections until 2030. But this small island nation with strong ties to both the European Union and the United States will need the Taoiseach to pilot it carefully through a turbulent world.
Well, let's bring in our guests on this round table. We're here at Páirc Uí Chaoimh in Cork, which is home to Ireland's national sports of Gaelic football and hurling. And I'm delighted to say we're joined by Liz Dunphy. Liz is a journalist with the Irish Examiner newspaper group. Emmanuelle Schon-Quinlivan is a senior lecturer in European politics at the University College of Cork, UCC. And Dan Boyle, the politician, Member of Parliament, Senator and former Lord Mayor of Cork, who is from the Green Party. You're all very welcome to this roundtable. Liz, to you first of all, Micheál Martin, how successful has he been in transforming Fianna Fail from a party that was blamed for Ireland's economic collapse 15 years ago?
So Micheál Martin took over as leader of Fianna Fail back in 2011. So that was following, obviously, the major economic financial crash of 2008. He took over as leader of Fianna Fail just before the general election of that year, and the party was decimated in that. So it lost 75% of its seats. It was the worst election ever in its 85-year history at that stage. Really terrible, and obviously that was coming off the back of all this terrible financial turmoil that the country had been plunged into. Ireland had to reach out to international partners for help financially. It was a time of major recession and financial trouble. So basically, he managed to build the party up so that by the next general election, they didn't get it back into power, but they had doubled their seats at that stage. That was the 2016, I think. And then by the next election, they were the largest party in government by 1 vote. And then by the next election again, which was just in 2024, just gone, they were the largest party overall. So I think he's widely attributed with massively increasing the party's fortunes at the ballot box, but also I think he's really kind of galvanised a sense of public trust. He comes across as a real kind of statesman. He comes across as somebody who puts the country before politics. So there have been a number of instances where he has gone very much against the grain within his own party when he felt it was the right thing to do. And his political instincts have generally been quite good in that regard. So there was Fine Gael, which is basically the Fianna Fail. So Micheál Martin is the leader of Fianna Fail, and Fianna Fail and Fine Gael are old school, biggest rivals. They're very similar, really, politically. They're both quite centre kind of ground parties. But because I suppose they share such a similar kind of like policy stance, they very much fight for the same voters, I suppose. So they're historically the two biggest parties in Ireland, and historically big rivals.
And now coalition partners. Yeah.
So Micheál Martin basically entered into this this kind of policy of, we called it confidence and supply, where he was in opposition and Fine Gael was in power, but they agreed to kind of support government policies and essentially from opposition, so as to give the country a sense of stability through Brexit and all the turmoil that was kind of foisting upon us, really. And that was very unpopular politically, but I think he did it for the country to build more stability and so I think that kind of reflects how he puts kind of the country before
back together again. Thanks, Liz. Let's bring in Emmanuelle. Emmanuelle, you're originally French.
Yes.
I'm Irish, and I still to this day can't figure out the difference in policy between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael most of the time. What's your reading as a guest living here and an outsider? How do you think the two parties fare?
That's really interesting, because French politics is very much divided across the spectrum, right, from left to right. So I have asked this question consistently to friends and students that I have. From what I understand, Fine Gael is slightly more conservative and more right-wing, and economically more right-wing. Fianna Fail would be more socially minded, maybe less conservative economically than, and more socially minded as well, than Fine Gael. So this is how I see the difference. But as Liz has just pointed out, they're two quite similar parties when it comes to policies. But in Ireland, I find that people know who they're going to vote for, and it matters whether it's Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil. They're very kind of entrenched, sometimes from history, from family history, their parents, even though we know that there's been an increasing volatility of voters, so there's less of an influence of what your parents voted like, and etc. But still, you vote Fianna Fáil or you vote Fine Gael, it matters to people. As a French citizen in Ireland, I still see them as quite similar.
One and the same. Let's bring Dan in. Dan, you're a Cork politician and you know Micheál Martin well. What do you think are the key issues for Irish voters?
Well, at the moment, it would be housing. And it's been something that's dominated Irish politics for the last number of elections and electoral cycles. And it's something of a conundrum for Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, because the arguments would be that we have the housing problems we have, and they are a growing problem across Europe, but Ireland seems to have them to a far larger degree because of both the links and the adherence that both the centre-right parties have towards the market being the only and best mechanism towards dealing with housing issues, and the reluctance to directly build, to put more of an emphasis on social housing, to look for developers to meet the shortfall is one of the biggest reasons why we have an existing and growing problem in that area in particular.
And Dan, tell me, elections in Ireland, so we now have two parties that are rivals for a century. They're in coalition, many would say to keep Sinn Féin out. How much of a threat do you think Sinn Féin is to Micheál Martin going forward?
Well, the current polls would have the three parties in and around 20% each. So there's 40% of the electorate who don't identify with either of those three parties. So whatever government is formed in subsequent elections will be one or two of those parties plus other parties. So the arithmetic will depend on who does well in which particular elections. The Green Party has done well in particular elections in recent past, did poorly in the last one. The Social Democrats have done well this time, may not do as well in the next time. And the willingness of parties to participate in government is always a factor, because the third wheel element in Irish politics has always suffered in subsequent elections as well. That's a factor that people bear in mind. And it's whether people are in politics to achieve things as well. The art of being in government and wanting to bring about change, or to have a safer political existence and score cheaper points by being in perennial opposition. And that's not, Ireland isn't a lot different from a lot of countries that way, I would think.
Thank you, Dan. Liz, to you, let's talk about migration and how Micheál Martin has managed that. It's a big talking point. I see lots of flags around. There's talk of an Irish far right, which is nowhere near as big or as mobilised as in the UK, for example. Talk to me about the issue of Ukrainians moving here. 80,000 people from Ukraine still living in Ireland. How have they been welcomed?
So Ireland very much kind of opened up its arms and its doors to people of Ukraine when the war broke out. Even just kind of from a grassroots level, like people organised themselves to send buses over to help people come over. They took them into their houses. There was a really big effort to accommodate people from Ukraine following the awful invasion of Russia on their country there. And the state basically set up a system so that the people of Ukraine could come over here and essentially, you know, get a PPS number, be entitled to healthcare, be entitled to work, some entitlements to housing. So it has become, I suppose, a more contentious issue over time. Obviously, Ireland, like the UK, we have been battling a cost of living crisis. And when people, I suppose, feel that they're losing power economically and socially, they'll look for other people to blame, won't they? And that sense of disenfranchisement, I suppose, or disempowerment over their own lives has very much been manipulated by forces online, by kind of far-right groups who have probably sought to capitalise on this kind of general sense of disenchantment within the country for their own political ends. And there has been, unfortunately, a rise in far-right ideology and in anti-immigrant and racism. We did it as Irish people ourselves, you know, fleeing from starvation during the famine, fleeing just economic, just poverty, you know, for such a long time. And England took us in, and, you know, I think our experience of immigration has made us a much more educated, wealthier, better country, and it is sad to see people within this country closing the door on people and stoking up trouble. Because the reality is, you know, Dan was talking about housing earlier, so the government has set, currently we have major problems with housing. The government has set targets of complete 303,000 houses or apartments by 2030. In order to do that, we have to build 41,000 this year and then reach 60,000 by 2030. But the central bank is predicting that we will only build about 32,500 this year. Some academics say it's probably closer to 30,000. Yeah. So we have major problems, and the ESRI, the Economic and Social Research Institute, has repeatedly for years now warned that we do not have enough people to build the infrastructure that we need. So we've had a major influx of people in this country. We've had a massive population increase in the last kind of 10 years or so, but we need them for our economy. A lot of people are people coming home that had immigrated before because our economy had improved, and other people that we need to bring in to keep our economy growing so that we can all be happier and wealthier and safer, ultimately.
To you, Emmanuelle, on the issue of the economy and money,
yes,
Micheál Martin is overseeing a budget surplus,
yes,
correct?
Yes,
I mean, your country, France,
yes,
is very, very difficult financial situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sure Emmanuel Macron would love to have, 4.1%? I saw the figure of a budget surplus. It's extraordinary.
He would love that. And obviously France is in a completely different situation. Now, Ireland, interestingly, you know, as Liz mentioned, went through the crash in a major way in 2008, became a programme country, right, from 2011 to 2013, and has now rebounded. emerged. Obviously, there was the Apple ruling that came through as well after lots of appeals and etc., which added to the surplus. There's always this question of the reliance on corporate tax from major, big tech industries in Ireland, and it being unsustainable, because we see with even what Donald Trump is deciding in America and the pressure he's putting on his, on his allies, tech, pharma, etc., could move, and therefore the corporate tax wouldn't come to Ireland anymore. But Micheál Martin is in an ideal situation. However, as Dan and Liz have pointed out, we have a huge housing problem. We have a huge water infrastructure problem, with about 60% of the water leaking through the system, and that's really significant. We have an energy supply problem as well. So lots of infrastructure work that is meant to be funded by the budget surplus, but the budget that has just been announced, though, has been criticised by many as unsustainable over several years, right? Because those infrastructure works require several years of work, and the money has a finite end. And there's also increased spending in the social aspect of the country, like the health system is still, in disarray. I arrived in this country 25 years ago, and we're still talking about trolleys and, lack of access. People on trolleys and corridors, lack of access to surgeons and to consultants, etc. So the money is great, and Micheál Martin is delighted with it, but there's a lot to do with it.
Dan, just talk to me about the worry about President Trump. How does Micheál Martin play Trump's game with tariffs? Because all these American pharma companies and tech companies who are here, if they go home, where does that leave Ireland?
Well, we're as part of the EU, we're obliged to use the Trade Commissioner to do most of the arguing for us. So Sefcovic is the person who does that on behalf of the EU. The Irish government works closely with them. European Council of Minister level, that's where Ireland makes most of its arguments. Ireland has had a kind of a difficulty, and governments like the French and the Germans have questioned our tax regimes in the past, which is why we've had the Apple judgment in front of us. And we do have an over-reliance on a small handful of firms declaring their profits to the Irish economy. And there is a fear that it's not sustainable into the long term. And in the medium term, there may be shocks to the system that may mean that we have to adjust quite quickly. So I think those are the real challenges that Micheál Martin has as the current Taoiseach, to make sure that sustainability-wise, that the economic model has a sustainable future, but that the economy itself is structured in such a way that these once-off benefits or historical benefits that we're receiving can be achieved in other ways economically, and that's a real political challenge.
Dan, I think some international countries will be very jealous of what Ireland has achieved, what Micheál Martin has overseen, getting American companies in, lowering the tax regime for them, and all that money that could have gone to the US Treasury flowing into Irish coffers.
Yeah, I think the argument from the American point of view in tariffs and the pressure that's being put on those multinational companies is something of a red herring. The reality is that the Trump administration would like these companies to make their products and sell their products mainly in the United States. But the European Union is a bigger market than the United States. So it's been to Ireland's benefit to be the gateway for a lot of these companies to use our use of the English language, to use an educated workforce, as well as having a tax package to give a broader economic package that has made it sustainable for those companies who operate here. I think that can be operated into the future.
Thanks, Dan. Liz, to you, I want to talk about Gaza and Palestine. Micheál Martin has spoken very strongly in favour of the Palestinian people, the genocide in Gaza. How important an issue do you think that is for Irish people?
It's actually been a hugely galvanising issue for Irish people. Like in Cork, the city that we're shooting this programme from today, we have very big protests every single Saturday. They've been going on since the very beginning of the invasion there. And it has stirred so much anger and passion in people, I think because of our own history, you know, as an occupied country for such a long time. But basically, I think people understand that kind of real need for independence. I know Micheál Martin has spoken out against the siege, against, you know, the blockage of trade getting into Gaza, like many years ago, more than 10 years ago. So it's been an ongoing issue for him, but I think it's also been a really big, passionate, ongoing issue for the people of Ireland. I think people really do empathise with the Palestinian cause and have kind of forged connections for a long time, because obviously this conflict is the most kind of bloody episode of it, but it's been going on for a long time, and the people of Gaza have been very much kind of trapped and with very limited rights for a long time. And I think Irish people have, you know, reached in and made connections with them for many years prior to this. So it's a kind of ongoing sense of solidarity with the people of Palestine, and it has been hugely felt here, definitely.
Just come in on that, Dan. I mean, we're a small country, Ireland, but in terms of our international voice, Irish people should be very proud.
Yes, it's something of a political difficulty for the government, but Ireland's position on Palestine has been quite significant, and they have operated with other European countries, Spain in the EU, Norway outside the EU, and tried to get a better international consensus on it. The difficulty is there's an attempt to pass legislation through our Parliament at the moment, the Occupied Territories Bill, which would mean that goods that are created in conflict zones that are occupied by a neighbouring state, which would be the case in the West Bank and Gaza, for instance, that we could place trading restrictions on them. It's still controversial, and it's going to be difficult to get through at an EU level, I believe, but it is an important statement of how the Irish people feel, and there is historical alignment in how Ireland perceives its own history, and that's why I believe the identity of Irish sentiment is so clearly with Palestinian people and the sufferings they're going through.
Thanks, Dan. Liz, just looking ahead to next year, 2026, Ireland will assume the presidency of the European Council, so Micheál Martin will be even bigger on the international stage. Talk to me about Ireland and the EU, because this is a relationship that has benefited us here in Ireland hugely.
Hugely. I think Ireland must be one of the biggest proponents of the EU, really. I mean, we have benefited so much from EU membership, as Dan was saying earlier. You know, so much of our FDI, which has been hugely influential for our economy, is reliant on us being that door to Europe, and English speaking and educated, as you said. But it's been absolutely massively important for us. I think most people here in Ireland would be really big Europhiles, you know, and I personally am very grateful for everything they've done. Also, you know, we're operating in such a multipolar, unstable world now, kind of gathering together as overall very like-minded, you know, Western democracies. I think it's really important that, you know, that we do at this time. And I think Micheál Martin would be obviously a very big proponent of Europe. Like, he's also served as well as Taoiseach, which he is at the moment. He's previously served as Minister for Foreign Affairs and Defence. So I think he's quite outward looking as a politician in that way. And I'm sure he's very much looking to use this as a way to, you know, promote Ireland's interests, but also to promote the interests of Europe, you know, and it's such an important time for Europe to band together with, you know, Russia essentially biting at our heels, you know, drone incursions in European countries, obviously the invasion of Ukraine. So it's a really vital time, I think, actually, for Ireland to have the presidency.
Emmanuelle, just looking ahead, is Micheál Martin, do you think, going to be Irish leader for years to come? Or will we see Fine Gael coming back stronger or even Mary Lou MacDonald and Sinn Féin at the next election ousting him?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I was surprised to hear that Micheál Martin said, I'm going to lead the party into the next general election. I didn't expect that, actually, because, you know, there's been a little bit of rumble in his own party. Fine Gael is, I think the Irish have got this culture of compromise, and even though there are lots of problems that we've discussed around this table, they do not vote necessarily for radical change like the French do, or, you know, they are pragmatists, and they just are thinking, right, we're going to keep on, you know, tinkering at the margins, but ultimately we're going to trust those that we know are capable, have showed their leadership on the international stage. So I would expect actually Fine Gael and Fianna Fail to carry on, particularly because Sinn Féin I don't think can get a majority in the Dáil. So it would need to actually collaborate with you know, Social Democrats and other left-leaning parties, but that's not what they did in the past election. So they didn't actually try to organise some kind of coalition in advance of the election to try and say, if you vote for us, we will be the next government. So it's an interesting approach. I think Sinn Féin wants to go it alone, and I don't think they can. And Micheál Martin certainly doesn't want to form a coalition with Sinn Féin.
Thanks, Emmanuelle. Final point to you, Dan, just briefly. It's a very cosy relationship, that coalition, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's very frustrating for other parties and politicians to try and break it.
Yeah, but historically, it's one that's fading quite badly. When I started in politics, Fianna Fáil's average vote was 44%. Fine Gael's average vote was 33%. They're both at 20% now, and the trend will go down further. We will become a more diverse political society, and the governments that will be formed, the Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael may still continue to be elements of it, but they will be 3, 4 and even 5-party coalitions. And it's the makeup of that coalition and those future relationships will determine the type of politics we'll have into our future.
Dan, Emmanuelle and Liz, thank you all so much for that insight into Micheál Martin and Irish politics. And if you want more debate and discussion, please head to YouTube, search for TRT World Roundtable. And if you like what you see there, do hit that subscribe button. But from me, Enda Brady here, and all the Roundtable team on the road in Cork, we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.